morning and welcome to the American Public Works Association's Talking Top Tech webinar series. Today's panel discussion will be 1 hour in duration and is titled Talking Top Tech, Cybersecurity for Critical Infrastructure Edition. Due to the format of this program, it is not eligible for CEUs. My name is Rita Cassada and I will be your facilitator today. I'm an education manager at APWA. I have a BS in Mechanical Engineering from Kansas State University and an MS in Engineering Management from the University of Kansas. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Kansas, and before joining APWA, I served as the Public Works Director for the City of Lewisburg, Kansas. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library in about a week. It is also available on YouTube. APWA members can log into the library to access content free of charge. Not an APWA member? That's not a problem. You can take the members library for a test drive. Spend 2 weeks accessing materials in our members library for free. Look at the link to sign up in your email today after the program. Today's session is interactive. So if you have a question for today's speakers, please type them into the chat pod, and you may do this at any time throughout the program. If you are in full screen mode, you can access the chat pod by hovering the mouse at the top of the screen and clicking the chat icon. Now it's time to introduce today's panelists. Jeff Janista is the Cybersecurity Advisor for the Department of Homeland Security. Kimberly Lanier is the Chief Information Officer for the City of New Orleans. Stephen Nguyen is the Senior Project Manager for Garver. And Willie Resto is the Director of IT for the City of Killeen, Texas. APWA is delighted to bring you such knowledge and experience today. We're going to start the program with each of the panelists giving a brief overview on how they're involved with cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. Jeff, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rita. As Rita mentioned, I'm Jeff Janista. I work for the Department of Homeland Security as a cybersecurity advisor, currently located out of the Kansas City metropolitan area. For everybody's information, DHS's cybersecurity efforts revolve around protecting critical infrastructure, which includes public works. And speaking of which, happy Public Works Week to everybody. The definition of critical infrastructure is systems and assets, whether physical or virtual, so viable that the incapacity or destruction of such may have a debilitating impact on security, economy, public health, or safety. So we look at that as if we lost a service for about 3 days, we're going to have our communities out there with pitchforks and torches trying to figure out what's going on. And we're trying to make sure that all of those critical services stay operational. In an ideal world, protecting critical infrastructure involves everyone's efforts to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover your systems surrounding the services from your staff, your information, your technology, and your facility. Just for everybody's information, there's currently 24 cybersecurity advisors nationally. So I've been all over the nation. I've been to every location for the rest of the guest speakers. I'm an email and a phone call away if anybody's got any questions. But right now our priorities are the critical infrastructure, given the current environment. We're focused on the energy sector because everybody needs power to do everything else. Water, wastewater, lifeline services to include police, fire, ambulance, and healthcare facilities. And compliments of November, election security once again. And secondarily, we look at soft targets, sporting events, things like that, parades, whatnot, and its security, and protecting the .gov environments. And .gov can go clear down to state, local, tribal, or territorial. So thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Jeff. Kimberly, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Kimberly Lanier, Chief Information Officer for the City of New Orleans. And the way that I'm involved in critical infrastructure and cybersecurity is the City of New Orleans, our Information Technology and Innovation Department services over 130 city sites, and that does include police, fire, and EMS. So we provide infrastructure for all of the city's public safety components, all of our departments. So cybersecurity is extremely important to us and managing that infrastructure. So be it communication to the internet, voice, data, our department provides that infrastructure and those mediums to city government. We have about 4,500 employees in our infrastructure, in our government, and about 3,000 devices that are on our network. So this is a pretty robust environment. The difference with us and many other cities is public safety is under our umbrella. So that makes our critical infrastructure even more critical. And cybersecurity plays in the way that we deliver data to all of those agencies.
Thank you, Kimberly. Stephen, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Stephen Nguyen. I'm a senior project manager at Garver with 20 years experience in SCADA and control systems, network security. Currently at Garver, I'm performing cybersecurity assessment at numerous water treatment plants throughout Texas to help them meet the WIA 2018 requirement for compliance. So basically, Garver provide mostly, engineering services and such, and we just got a new office in College Station to serve Texas. So my main focus right now is mostly just cybersecurity, since everybody's trying to meet the WIA deadlines this year. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Stephen. Willie, and would you like to go next?
Yes, my name is Willie Resto. I'm the Director of IT for the City of Killeen, and my involvement in the cybersecurity world started with our Texas House bill for the certified cybersecurity training. So we developed ours in-house, got it certified through the state, and then been conducting that training throughout this year, which I think our deadline is in June. But as well, I met Mr. Nguyen when he did his assessment. That's another part that is becoming part of our IT requirements, not only for infrastructure, but for bonding, for EOC grants. We all have now have to conduct these cybersecurity assessments. So it's becoming part of our everyday life, and of course I'm involved with our water and sewer departments. So that's where my involvement comes in. A lot of education within the last year over this topic.
All right, thank you, Willie. So now we've had the introduction of our panelists. The rest of the program is for question and answers, and we did have some questions submitted in advance, but please go ahead and submit your questions in the chat pod throughout the program so we can get those answered by our great panelists. The first question is for Willie, and just kind of wanted to get an overview on how you would describe cybersecurity. What exactly is cybersecurity? If you could start with that one.
Yes, that's a good question. So some of the things with cybersecurity, first of all, the term cybersecurity is something that I think the media, we threw out there. But in the old days, it was just information technology security or electronic information security. It sounds cooler when you say cybersecurity. But it's the practice of defending computers, servers, mobile devices, electronic systems, networks, and data from malicious attacks. Just trying to keep the data of any kind of attack from unauthorized access. That is the key definition of what cybersecurity is all about. It can branch out into a lot of other different things: network security, application security. but in gist, it's just trying to keep our systems safe from unauthorized access.
Thank you so much, Willie. The next question is for Kimberly. Can you give some examples of what assets should be considered critical infrastructure and what types of things you have in your city?
Sure. Right now, if we think about what's critical to us in the COVID-19 pandemic and response, communication has become essential. So whether we considered it critical or not, our communication mediums are critical infrastructure for us. So if you think about the internet communicating across between devices and staff and delivery of data, anything that is a part of that ecosystem or that delivery system is critical infrastructure. If you consider the internet a utility along with water and power, then all parts that are connected to or from it would be considered that critical infrastructure. It is no longer something that we can take for granted, so it is not just the pipes, it's not just fiber, but it's all the things that connect to it. And if we're not looking at our infrastructure in that manner or not considering those things infrastructure, then when they are unavailable, it becomes clearly apparent to you that it is not just the conduit themselves, but it is your servers, it is the data and the information that your constituents and the people that you service access on a daily basis. Those things have to be considered part of your critical infrastructure in order to really, as Willie mentioned, create a holistic plan to defend against any threats or vulnerability.
All right, thanks, Kimberly. Willie, do you have anything else to add about the critical infrastructure in Killeen?
Yeah, the critical infrastructure for us, you know, it's our water and sewer groups. Currently, part of their SCADA systems, that's a concern for me because the way it operates with the radio. So we have to make sure those items are secure. A lot of times, there's a disparity between the water sewer technical side and then the IT technical team. So we both have to work together to make sure that we're putting in all our good practices, security practices specifically. That was one of the things when Stephen did his review over here. There were some things that we pointed out that, hey, those things weren't quite in place to keep our water and sewer systems and the SCADA systems secure.
Thank you, Willie. Looks like we've got a question from one of the participants. They're asking about what are some of the safer online meeting platforms, Zoom, WebEx, etc. Willie's nodding his head. Is that something you want to try to answer, Willie?
Yeah, I can answer that. So obviously, like Kimberly said, you know, communication has become a part of COVID-19. Are any of them safe? No. I think what you have to do is understand the settings that you have to create. So the privacy settings, the only inviting the individuals that need to be in the meeting, even in the meeting that we have here today. You know, making sure that those panelists, like in our case, that we have the specific passwords and the user and IDs. Don't share those out to the public because that's kind of how the Zoom bombing happens. Teams, if you're with Microsoft Teams, has been a good choice if you have that in your organization because it is somewhat internal and you can control it. But you really need to make sure that you go into the settings, whichever platform you're using, and turn on those security settings. In other words, the host, nobody can join unless the host allows them to. Nobody can present unless the host allows them to. You have to really control it, close the door as a phrase. When somebody comes in the room, everybody's like the panelists are all in the room, the door is closed, nobody else can come in. So you can control that whole meeting. We're doing council meetings totally by teleconference, and we had to come up with some unique ways where citizens could participate. And so you just got to be careful. Got to do some research with it. A lot of companies have put out documents out there, but they all still have a degree of risk. But we have to do our job and go through the settings. That's kind of the approach we took here.
Thanks, Willie. I think Kimberly also wanted to add to that answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that your approach is really important to what you consider secure. And so if you think about the data or the information that will be divulged in that meeting and how you protect it is one thing when we think about security. And also, as Willie mentioned, the support. Do you have a way to control the settings for that meeting? And if you are using an application that does not give you that level of control or that level of support, it is for you, and in that instance, less secure than something that you could manage.
Thank you, Kimberly. And Stephen also wanted to add to that answer.
Yeah, just on the technical side, I want to point out is like there's a lot of these meeting software out there, and the problem is most of them is not going to be as secure as you think, with encryption and all. So be careful what you use. So one thing to be really careful, since you don't know if they're encrypting your data or not, and if it can get hacked or not, is just be aware that you are talking over the internet. You're going through a server, you have no idea if your images are being recorded or not. Just make sure the type of discussion you're having is not confidential. So if that's something that's confidential, something you might want to do over a phone instead of a Zoom, because Zoom are being used by kids right now, so I don't know how secure Zoom is, I mean, my kids are using Zoom right now for their class discussion, so I wouldn't want to talk about a new design you've got, that's confidential over Zoom. But just that's something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Great point, Stephen. Thank you. Actually, the next question is for you, Stephen. About SCADA networks, can you consider those being secured since they're not actually connected to the internet, or are there other considerations with SCADA that people should look at?
Okay, so by not connected to the internet, I mean, that's something that's been done for a long time. I mean, we call that air gapping. And a lot of people forget the thing, well, I'm not connected to the internet, so, I'm secured. It's harder. It's harder for someone to hack your system if you're air gapped, but I wouldn't say it's impossible. So you got to keep that in mind that although your system's air gapped and you're not connected to the internet in any way, there are other ways. Let's say someone walked by with a USB stick, and unknowingly put into, the computer, the workstation, or any computer, the engineering station, in your control room. We don't know what's on that USB stick. So, that's one way a virus or malware can get on there. What if someone had a modem, an old modem connected to a PC that you weren't even aware that it's still there, So that's another security risk. The one thing I advise is try to plug up all your USB ports that's not in use. Make it a policy where you don't allow your staff to use it to charge their phone. I mean, it's just another way for something to get in. Or even like a Wi-Fi dongle, things like that can easily be plugged into a USB port. So just because you want to connect internet doesn't mean there's no other way, that someone can hack your system. For example, I've been to a lot of sites where their server room is not locked, and it looks more like a closet. And you have so many different people going in there, And let's say someone get a wire cross, because I've seen where you got a SCADA system that's not on the internet, and then you have the enterprise system also in the same room, and that is connected to the internet. Or they have an internet just for, for the staff's usage, although it's not on the SCADA system. And I've had issue where people cross those wires. They unplug one Ethernet cable and plug into another. Now, you know, you got the internet, you know, connected to your SCADA. So, you know, just be very careful that just because your system right now is currently not on the internet doesn't mean it's totally secured. So there are numerous ways where, you know, you could have that vulnerability, you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's see, the next question I think is for Willie. Can you talk about cybersecurity training and what is the need for that? What does it involve?
Okay, yes. So, you know, I guess people argue about educating employees on cybersecurity. You know, so the way I look at it is, you know what you know what you don't know. If your employees don't know how to recognize a security threat, how can they expect to be avoided, you know, or remove it or report it? That's why I believe the initiative in Texas is a good initiative. If we educate our employees on the things that can happen, it definitely will help them. And some people will look at IT and go, well, don't you have firewalls or security software? But see, that's not enough. Our employees, it's not the technology, are the most common entry points. You know, it's for phishers, it's through emails. So when it comes to it, you know, the employees need to be educated on it. I can tell you from the initiatives that we've done here in the city of Killeen, I now receive emails from departments going, hey, Willie, I think this is a phishing scam. And so far, you know, they've been right. So the education that we've been giving them is really helping because they're recognizing it. And I think the most important thing is we've got to allow our employees to identify, don't shame them. Give them the opportunity to report it without any repercussions, because that's what we want them to do. We want them to participate. We want them to be our eyes out there at the first level. So that's what I think we need to awareness training. And it's always the difficult part, because here in the city of Killeen, we have about 1,200 employees. I can think with Kimberly, with the number of employees that you have there in the city of New Orleans, how do you train them? So how do you get them in one room? How do you validate it? I think the most important part is you've got to have some mechanism also to test them. You know, we use a learning management system plus the training that we develop in-house. I like doing a formal in front of class type training, but it is difficult for us of cities to get everybody to do training. Nobody likes to do training, but we have to. In our case, we have at least the Texas legislature saying it's mandatory, so everybody has to do it, including our elected officials. So that's my take, and some of the other panelists may have some other thoughts.
Thank you, Willie. Jeff, you had something you wanted to add to that answer?
Yes, ma'am. Jeff again from Homeland Security, and as Willie stated, 92% of all attacks right now are started by email. In layman's terms, from an IT security perspective, the biggest threat that we have from IT or OT is operational technology threats, is that person that sits between the keyboard and the chair. It's us, it's our users. Technology can only go so far, so there has to be continuous training. It can't just happen in October during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Knowing that public works, you typically work for state, local, tribal, territorial type entities. I would hope the director of IT is doing phishing campaigns, as Willie mentioned, and there's numerous companies out there that will provide this. Some of them are free, some of them are pay to play at relatively low costs, etc. But another thing I wanted to point out is under the DHS umbrella, we've already sponsored, it's called the Federal Virtual Training Environment, FedVTE. And that is That is open training, 137 courses and over 800 hours of cybersecurity awareness, certification training, etc., regarding the security of our networks. And that's free to any employee of a state, local, tribal, territorial, or government agency, along with all veterans. So you just need to look up Fed VTE, it's Victor Tango Echo at the end. Shoot them an email real quick, they'll give you an account. You can go in and it's some really neat stuff. Everything from phishing campaign type training clear up to what exactly is the dark web. So it's something to consider by the leadership and the decision makers.
Thank you, Jeff. Actually, the next question is for you. Under what circumstances should someone call into the FBI or Department of Homeland Security to help with an incident, and how would they even do that?
Very good question, Rita. A lot of it's going to depend on the policies and procedures that each of the individual organizations have. What that means is A, you should have a good incident response plan to begin with. That includes how are you going to detect and how are you going to respond. Pretty much everybody on the call has probably heard of cyber insurance, which is the new wild, wild west out there. I would ask not only the attorneys, but the IT directors need to review these policies, because these policies might stipulate that if you contact the federal government, whether it's the FBI or DHS, they won't support you. So that's something you need to look at hard as far as if your organization has a cyber policy. The FBI has a site where you can report anonymously an incident, which is really good stuff, because we collate all of the anonymous reports and we start checking out trends, and then that in turn comes back out to develop best business practices. We will contact major vendors, Cisco, Windows, Microsoft, whomever, and say, look, we're seeing these trends and incidents based on your products. You need to go create a patch, create a fix, write a document, whatever that is. Regarding who to call for the FBI, their site is www.ic3, that's India Charlie 3.gov, and you can also shoot an email to cyberadvisor@dhs.gov to report the incident. Either way, most of the FBI offices work closely with their DHS counterparts. For example, me. FBI has a cyber crimes task force. They do have like minimum type response dollar amounts for the cost. However, what they will do is they will collect these incident reports, and if the amounts start to break those minimum thresholds, then they will open up a case and actively pursue the takes the lead on this. DHS steps out because it's a law enforcement issue. If DHS the attack and then mitigate the attack. I also have connections to what's known as the multi-state ISAC, or the Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. They have malware analysis teams. They have incident response teams. They publish best business practices. I highly recommend getting on the MS ISAC page and signing up for that, because you will get specific threat and vulnerability information concerning the critical sector you're in. I want to say lastly, for DHS and MSISAC, it's no cost. So if you're worried about fees or expenses, the DHS side is no cost. If you're worried about the FBI folks, they will take your equipment to do forensics on it, so you're going to be without the equipment involved in the attack for 3 to 4 months. And finally, if you contact the FBI and DHS, we have resources where we've partnered with Interpol. We've been tracking basically 40 to 50 different ransomware keys that are available to us. We will try to unlock your systems before you have to pay, but we need to know about that. That's my bone for get a hold of us, please.
And kind of a follow-up question is, what would you recommend? Is there a way to establish a relationship before something happens so that you've already got that relationship?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing worse to a CEO than to have a big black Suburban show up first thing in the morning to do what we call victim notification. Normally we do that if during another investigation we discover that your organization was the source and that you've been attacked without your knowledge. For myself as a CSA, I work the 4-state region of Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. But like I said at my introduction, there's 24 of us, and we're trying to get a CSA in every state. It would absolutely work to everybody's benefits to invite DHS in for that meeting. We can discuss what capabilities DHS has, what services we can provide to everybody. Stephen discussed the American Water Works Infrastructure Act of 2018, and DHS has assessments that support that. Risk assessment as well is what his company does. We can do scanning on your networks to tell you what vulnerabilities you have. We will go so far as to tell you what's critical, high, moderate, and low. And, quite honestly, if you know who I am or who your resident CSA is, even potentially just get a hold of the FBI and say, who's my cyber crimes task force person? Let's just have a cup of coffee and introduce each other, because if there's questions, we absolutely share information. So if the FBI catches wind of an incident, they call me. If I catch wind, I let them know. We look and work with everybody from the governors down. We also work across threat sectors to include Secret Service, FBI, like I said, the ISAC. We can even go so far as to get the cyber teams from the Department of Defense to help us out if it's critical enough. So yeah, invite us in. Let's meet. Let's talk capabilities, who can do what, and how we can partner so that you're comfortable speaking with us. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, Jeff. The next question is for Stephen. Can you talk about any changes that may need to be made for wastewater and water IT systems?
Or I guess we're referring to cybersecurity. Like right now, the requirement for OWIA doesn't affect wastewater, but of course it's important. It's mostly water treatment plants. But the one thing that we always try to emphasize is separation. I noticed everybody put one firewall on their system. Say, okay, we're protected. But, you have a bunch of smaller systems all over your SCADA. So the key major change that you could do to your system to improve this is put a firewall on every subsystem You know, let's say you have a remote system, you know, put a firewall on there. I mean, that's one thing that really help. If let's say you get attacked, you know, that way you isolate, you know. You attack at the remote site or something, that's your isolation. So that's one thing, you know, I would do, you know, if you want to make any changes to your IT system at you know, your site, your plants.
Okay, and this may be along the same lines. It talks about what steps do you recommend for smaller entities to follow when setting up the remote warning systems and monitoring. I know you talked about firewalls. Is there anything else they should consider?
Remote warning system and monitoring. Well, I don't know if that's anything related to cybersecurity. I'm thinking they're asking question more for alarming, I guess. I don't know if we can get more clarity on that.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it was for the water and wastewater, the actual alarms that might be going off is the way I was reading it. But if that's not the way it was intended, we'll
Yeah,
get a
I
clarification.
understand. I was relating to cybersecurity, so I can answer it. But remote warning system, I guess if you get hacked, I guess. I mean, there are systems for monitoring, but they're complex, and we're talking about, you know, intrusion detection and so on. And we do have, you know, something like that where you can put in but it requires a lot of logging and someone going through it. So it's not easy to detect and doing kind of warning system or monitoring. That's what we're asking.
All right, and Kimberly wanted to add to that answer?
Well, yes, just that any warning system or alerting system has a communication mechanism. So how they are going to communicate, always consider where that's coming from. Is it coming from an external host, or you responsible for getting those alerts or sending out those alerts? And those usually indicate an entry point, whether it is through your email system or it is cloud to your infrastructure. So knowing how those warning systems or those alerting systems are being configured could indicate where there are entry points or security vulnerabilities in your infrastructure. Most of our alerting systems are actually configured through our networking group because those systems have some type of connection to us. We have flood sensors that are network-based, and we also have some devices that have been put on our network to measure water and then lower barriers or barricades in high water traffic areas. There's a camera attached to those. Those cameras go back to our security center, which is a real-time crime center for us, but those security cameras send back those alerts. And at some point that ultimately gets to ride our network in some way, and we have to be conscious of what those security entry points will be and how we segregate them from the rest of our infrastructure.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. Willie also wanted to add to that answer.
Yes, I'm going to echo a little bit of what both Kimberly and Stephen has talked about, but try to address another angle of this is the encryption part. You know, for the radio systems that we use in SCADA and remotes, that we do proper encryptions, and part of that, in my experience, is that the passwords that were set at defaults, so anybody can hack into the system. You could have, you need to make sure that those systems are that way, and just as Stephen said, we also need to make sure that we segregate those systems. So is our SCADA system running off our network, and is it not firewalled off or VLAN'd off, or how did we segregate that? How are we controlling that? How is that information getting from our traffic camera to our data center? Are we encrypting any of that end-to-end encryption, which means you have to have certain hardwares in place via firewalls, and you're not buying things off the shelf. I've actually experienced that here, where our water sewer guy just goes out and thinks he can buy something off of Amazon because he needs a small little switch, but it's not managed, and that causes those issues. So you open those security gaps all the way to their SCADA systems. Yes, it's all radio, but is it encrypted? What's the level of encryption on the switch, on the radios? Who's checking those? Who's updating those? We need the IT security, whoever that function is in your city or organization, really needs to get in there to help them out how to ensure those securities are in place. Now, part of what Stephen does, he can come in, or what Jeff does, they can help us with some assessments, because sometimes it's a little, it's a big monster to attack. You don't know where to come from, so you need to do some assessments internally, kind of get your tick list together, and then from that point, come with a strategy of how to fix that.
Thank you, Willie. The next question is for municipal entities, what types of information do you need from Public Works, whether it's water, wastewater, or transportation, when they're looking at new software and security measures? Basically, how should they talk IT with you? And I think Stephen was going to start with that answer.
Okay, so, you know, when I show up in someone's door, you know, I'm still a human, you know. So don't be scared, like, you know, oh, how should I talk to this IT guy? What I'm always looking for is, you know, what exactly are your requirement? What do you need, you know? And what's your knowledge level? It gives you an idea of what you're looking for and what are you expecting out of the software. Let's say you're looking for new security measures. Well, I kind of just need to know what you have in place already, you know? So that way we can figure it out, you know, what you really need. Because I don't want to give you, you know, like everything out there, you know, everything in the world could cost you $1 million to implement or something. We actually just need a, you know, $200 router or something like that. So, you know, don't be afraid to just explain at your level. You know, most IT people, you know, can understand as long as you give them, you know, your requirements and your risk, you know, what kind of risk level you are at, you know, okay, we need, you know, we got to protect this data, you know, this is very confidential data. So that way I would know what type of equipment, you know, to recommend for you. So it's actually not that hard, but in order for me to understand what you need, I do need those requirements. And it can be really basic, it don't have to be technical. So just feel free to express, you know, at a very basic level when you're talking to IT of, you know, what you're trying to get at. You know, you don't need to know IT talk. You know, I'm sure Willie can explain that too. I mean, you know, we are still just regular folks that can talk at your level. So, you know, that's what I want to kind of point out.
Thanks, Stephen. I think, Jeff, did you want to add to that answer as well?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks, Rita. I mean, the big question was, how do you talk IT with leadership? The irony is when I do my assessments, I present these from a business perspective, okay? IT is nothing but a service, okay? But these services, whether it's water, wastewater, whether it's taxation at the counties, whether it's scheduling potholes or whatever the Public Works folks do, it all surrounds what people can impact that service, what data do you need, what technology supports that service, whether it's hardware or software, and where is it? There's a follow-up question that I'm going to touch on, but if you don't get the business leaders involved, and that starts basically with a business impact analysis to where you have a listing of all services, and then you prioritize those. You know, what's most important to least important for your organization. And then from there, you can kind of figure out, as Stephen said, okay, what's the most important data we have for the most important service? And from a risk management perspective, You look at that service, you define what are the threats, what are the capabilities, and what are the consequences. The consequences could be reputation, it could be financial, it could be regulatory. You know, Stephen talked about the AWIA. Could be the EPA. You may have regulations and fines. If you look at it from the power sector, if they don't meet requirements, they have the chance to be fined $1 million a day for every violation. That could be a big hit. But there's kind of a follow-on about cloud computing, and I often joke, I didn't coin the phrase, but I did borrow it. It's what I call doing some R&D. That's remove, distribute. Cloud is an acronym. It's not a thing. Cloud stands for China loves our uploaded data. So you have to consider who's going to be your cloud provider, what security measures do they have in place, what part of the cloud infrastructure are you responsible for, what part are they responsible for, do you third-party vendor it, and ultimately your organization is responsible for all regulatory requirements. So do you have the capacity within your contracts to seek reimbursement from these cloud providers? I mean, that's another risk decision that has to be brought into it. So I don't personally care, you know, when people want to talk IT, because to me, we get into the nuts and bolts and people's hair starts hurting. But if you break it down simplistically from 10 or 30,000 feet, you know, this service relies on data and technology. And how is that being used? And then, like Steve said, you do a risk assessment against that data and that technology so that you address the most prioritized vulnerabilities that you have from start to finish. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to put a $10,000 security measure in place for a $100 piece of a device. But it might make sense if you can deploy that $10,000 piece to protect the entire enterprise that's worth more than $10,000. So those are some of the perspectives I take towards my assessment. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Steph. And Kimberly, did you have something you wanted to add on the cloud storage options?
Yeah, and cloud storage is consider it part of your storage. Just because it's offline, it means that you have a way to continue business. So it is continuity. It is not any more secure or resilient than you make it. So even with platforms that are cloud-based, authentication to those. It's still the internet. It's still openly accessible. So think about how those users are accessing your confidential data outside of your environment, because that's what you have in a cloud-based environment. So at home, at the coffee shop, when they access information and walk away from a computer, is the computer picked up? Is it stolen? Is somebody viewing that information? And think about securing all of your data from any possible place in the world, because when you're using a cloud platform, basically that's what you've given. Open access to your information, and that information has got to be considered part of your infrastructure for you to really think about data and privacy in the way that you should be if you're talking about securing information over a cloud platform. So whether that is visual data, it's videos, it is information about your systems, it could be the financials that run your public works department, your grants. All of those opportunities are still part of your confidential infrastructure. So for us, cloud-based platforms still require a double factor, a double method of authentication where at all possible. So how are they storing your data and how do you access it? And how do I know that it's me? A simple password might not be enough. So on-premise, you understand that you are in a secured environment, but when you're off-premise, it's really important to have some other way to verify that the person who is accessing your cloud platform and your data is the person that you want to have that access.
Thanks, Kimberly. Willie, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that answer? Okay. We can move on to the next question then. For a small city set up for a remote office, what is like the one thing to really invest in that forms your first gate? Is it a router? Is it something else? Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, a firewall is the one thing that everybody choose for a small setup. The other thing, I guess we're talking about like a remote office, so I guess I can relate to, let's say, a remote site. A firewall will be fine. I'm trying to think what else you would need. Yeah, that'd be the best thing to get. Just a very basic firewall that can handle VPN in case you want to connect to any other site securely. We're always talking about a remote location. The other thing is you know, a locked door. A lot of people forget about that, but you know, in big corporation you have those electronic locks, and then I notice like when I go to small location, you know, the only thing about, oh, you know, how can I hack through my little firewall? But you know, people can walk in, and you know, there's other way of hacking. You know, like I mentioned before, you know, a USB stick lamp and such, or even on your firewall, you know, any port that's not used, you know, plug, you know, cover them up. Or if you are going to get a firewall, the one I recommend is get a managed one. Okay, don't get don't, you know, you get a router, get a managed, you know, switch, you know, whatever. Make sure it's managed, and that you can lock out, you know, any of the port that's not used. You know, that's the number one thing is if you forget, you know, is that someone can walk up and just plug, you know, a laptop into it. So make sure, you know, you have that firewall locked up somewhere. So investing in you know, firewall is just the first step. You know, there you also have to secure the firewall itself, you know, physically and so on. So that'd be my recommendation. You know, yeah, get a nice firewall that's managed that allow you to do encryption and VPN, and you know, able to turn off, disable any port that you don't use. Thank you.
All right, looks like we have another question about cloud data. Do we need to back up the cloud data locally? If the answer is yes, what's the best way to do that? Willie, thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. So the mantra is always back up, back up, back up, off-site backup, and check your backup. So no matter where you've got data, even if it's in the cloud, you know, you really still need to have that backup port. If you get ransomware, or if you get any type of other attack, you got to have that offline data. We preach it. We don't always necessarily test it. So I would say rule of thumbs, how important is that information? Do you have backups? Are they off-site backup? When I say off-site, are they disconnected from your network? That's the part where I think people don't understand that part. So it's not connected to your network, so it cannot be, because quite honestly, ransomware can sit in your system for 20 days, 30 days. You don't know how long it's been there. You don't know how far you go back. There is some cost associated with that. But I think with everything that we see, it's those backups that's going to get you back operational, or get that information operational. We do have a lot of trust in the cloud, but some of that data, if it's critical data, I would back it up, would be my suggestion. And on what? There are several tools out there now that are very inexpensive. Backup has become a pretty affordable commodity. It depends on what you get. You can get 130 terabytes for about $24,000, or you can If you need less than that, there are still other tools that you can get. There's also other places that'll help you back up off-site. Other companies that will help you to have several data centers. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Willie. I think we've got time for one more question, and it's for Kimberly. What is the most important part of creating an effective cybersecurity plan?
I would say the most important part of an effective cybersecurity plan is having a solid asset inventory. So it's knowing what you have and where it is. Shadow IT systems exist all in every organization. So much of what we spoke about is the kind of information that is stored somewhere else or has information silos within your organization. So understanding, going through the exercise that Jeff can help with, one of those, and I'm sure many of the panelists have been through, it's inventorying your assets, inventorying your servers, your infrastructure, your data, and learning what, those discoveries are very important. You need to know what to protect to do the best job at protecting it.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that answer? Let's see. Stephen wanted to, there was a question, I think it's this one, Stephen, that we don't have any network drawings or even know what is on our SCADA system. It's all handled by third-party integrators. What happens if they're compromised?
So this question relates to Kimberly's question about the security plan. Is you got to have something, part of the plan, part of your plan for, let's say, your emergency response plan is to have all your assets listed and your drawings, network drawing. That's key. So when you do get compromised, what do? You go through your plan and you realize you don't even know what's on your network. How did the intruder get in? So that's very important. It's part of your plan to have all your network drawings, all your computers, all your servers, your network listed, what IP addresses, what ports were open on which network. That way you can identify, what kind of attack it was quickly. So it is very key that part of your security plan is to have all that in place, because when you are compromised, you need to know what your landscape is. What does it look like? What does your network look like? Did you just recently add a computer or maybe a router or something that might have caused this? So that's why we always stress, that you need to know what your network is. So thank you. That's why I want to add it.
Thank you, Stephen. And Willie had something else to add as a final remark. Do you have something else you wanted to add, Willie?
Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself. When you think about incident response and what you're going to do, I think we want to look for a quick and easy button that's going to generate all our reports and generate all this information. I know the Department of Homeland Security has some templates. I suggest that you actually engage your emergency operation people. Those guys are used to handling incidents, and they have a beautiful guide that tells you, basically walks you through all the information. You need the contact information. You need the addresses of all your facilities. And then it doesn't have to be fancy drawings. I think that's what we get scared of. We don't really know how that helps. You can bring in outside people to do this. That was going to cost you a little bit. But some of the beginnings of it you can do internally. I really do. The emergency management group handles incidents. And they already have kind of a playbook already. And you develop that playbook. One suggestion, keep your playbook on paper, put it on the network, because if your network's compromised, you don't have paper to back it up, you will have nowhere to go. But it's not, don't look at it as this big monster. It is really pretty simple to do. We've done it here in the city of Killeen, and it's just simple, small processes. I do have our emergency operations guy involved, and he's given us a kind of a template that he asks when an operation happens. So when you have Hurricane Harvey, here's the things he's going to run through. It's no different, and if you have a cyber attack, it's just a who, went, where, when, how type situation. But you definitely need to start it. And there are some guides out there. I know in Texas, DIR has some guides, but your emergency operations centers, they already know how to handle these situations. We just need to take their playbook, modify it to work for us.
Thanks, Willie. That was great. That is all the time we have for today with our panelists. I want to thank Jeff, Kimberly, Stephen, and Willie for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. This is Rita Cassida, and it's been a pleasure moderating this program for you today. Please remember to register for the next program in the series titled Talking Top Tech Waste to Resource Technology Edition. It is scheduled for Thursday, June 11th. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation form after the program. The link will be emailed to you. Please note, due to the free format of this program, it is not eligible for CEUs. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within a week. APWA members can log on to the library and access past Click, Listen, Learn and Talking Top Tech and conference content free of charge. Not an APWA member? Take the members library for a test drive. Spend 2 weeks accessing the materials on the members library for free. You can look for a link to sign up in your email today after the program. I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your participation during the program, and have a great day.